Screenshot. Screenshot. Good morning, everyone. As you can see, I'm dressed formally this morning because I'm talking about a pretty serious book of mine, The Magick of Aleister Crowley. Now, when it first started, the first edition of this was The Magick of Thelema. Okay, now the Magick of Thelema was, I started writing it in around 1991. So we're looking at 30 years ago, okay, when I started writing this. I was a younger man then, and I've learned a lot since then, but I just want you to keep in mind that the bulk of this material was collected and arranged and everything 30 years ago. Now this first edition, it was my first book with Weiser. It was called The Magick of Lima, Handbook of the Rituals of Aleister Crowley. You'll notice that I've got it spiral bound. It was not spiral bound at first. It was whatever they call where you just glue it. Is that perfect binding? And it came out in the winter time, and I think when it was manufactured, the glue in the factory or something didn't set up well, and the book started to almost immediately fall apart. So if you've got a first edition of this book, hang on to it because it's a collector's item now. Most likely that first edition of yours fell apart. As a matter of fact, so many of them fell apart that people had to buy another one, and the second printing was then Smythe sewn, or whatever they call it. That it was a better binding. So perhaps the only reason that this book sold so well early on was everyone had to buy two of them. If that's the case, I'm happy with that too. So just keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind that over the years, a lot of original Crowley material has come on the market, and over the years, something like this has come out that the OTO was responsible, I'm happy to say, for bringing out what's called Book 4. Now this is the Rituals of Aleister Crowley, but it would be some time before this book hit the light of day, and I'm not sure, 1994, and up until then, most Crowley material was really difficult to find, a lot of it. And most of people who were interested in Aleister Crowley and seriously practicing magic, this was their only text, or their primary text, Magic in Theory and Practice, which represents part 3 of what Crowley intended this to be. This is what most serious magicians were working off of and starting their Thelemic magical career on material based in this book. Ask anyone, it's not an easy read. It's wonderful. It's inspiring. There's wonderful things in it. It's enough to get a serious person interested. But it's not really a practical handbook or a practical introduction to any of this. I wanted a book I could read that would explain this, at least in a very preliminary way, to explain this book. I wanted to write a book that I wished I would have read along with this. And so when I left Falcon Press in 1991 or 2, I set to work to write that book. And I was lucky enough to interest the fine publishers, Wiser Books, in the project. And they said, go ahead on. And so there's that story. So I want you to know that, and always keep in mind during our morning readings of this, that this was written 30 years ago. And, well, just keep that in mind. Here we go. Magick of Aleister Crowley, the Handbook of the Rituals of Thelema, by Lon Milo DuQuette. Like a lot of books that we've been reading, it's going to be a challenge to work our way through things with lots of quotes from Crowley and other things, but we'll work our way through. The inside frontispiece there is a beautiful, beautiful and very hermetically, thelemically correct tree of life. The image provided to us by Hymenaeus Beta of the OTO, Frater Superior of the OTO, who allowed us to print this image in 1993. The source is Crowley's Magick Without Tears, 777 Revised, and the Book of Thoth. I dedicated it to my wife of 35 years, and it's now 52 years. St. Constance of the Well, Our Lady of Perpetual Motion, this work is lovingly dedicated. Then there's a quote from the Book of the Law. There is no bond that can unite the divided but love. Liber Alva Legis, chapter 1, verse 41. Keep in mind, if you're reading from this one, there's more material. This is an expanded version of this. The foreword is by the Frater Superior of the OTO and dear friend of the family, Hymenaeus Beta. And because he is the international head of the OTO, his name is not officially, his mundane name is not officially known publicly. So even though most of you know who he is, or can find out quite easily, officially we just refer to him as Hymenaeus Beta. Hymenaeus Alpha was Grady L. McMurtry, who initiated me into the OTO in 1975. This is from Hymenaeus Beta. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Aleister Crowley possessed far too much technical knowledge of magic to readily understand the problems of ordinary students. He frequently asked his younger colleagues to help make his teachings more accessible, and once explained that it's the sort of thing I can't do myself, not knowing the scope of the mind of the gentle reader, unquote. Like other gentle readers who have delved into Crowley's system on their own, Brother DuQuette found many of the gaps and pitfalls in the system by the time-honored method of falling into them, scrambling out, and trying again until he crossed them. The present work incorporates many of the results of his personal work. What is true of science holds true for scientific illuminism. DuQuette is the first to allow that while some of his findings may be replicated by future experimenters, others are subjective, personal interpretations. And you keep that in mind, too. I say as I digress. But even the latter are invaluable as suggesting other lines of investigation and as examples of the kind of personalization of the system that enables the magician to make it his or her own. DuQuette also drew on recent research by other students that will be formally published in the forthcoming one-volume edition of Crowley's Book 4. Speaking of Crowley's, speaking of Lon Milo DuQuette's mythical eponym, Crowley wrote in part 2 of his Book 4 that, quote, Milo began by carrying a newborn calf, and every day by day, as it grew into a bull, his strength was found sufficient. It is not stretching the metaphor too far to suggest that the present work will be useful to many students as an introductory guide to those portions of Crowley's magnum opus dealing with ceremonial magic. Occultism frequently gives ample grounds for criticism to its detractors by making insupportable claims for vaguely defined powers, the whole compassed by nonsensical theory. As Israel Regardie did before him, DuQuette avoids this by writing from his own experience with a healthy leavening of common sense and a refreshing sense of humor. Love is the law, love under will, Hymenaeus Beta, Frater Superior, Ordo Templi Orientis. So, next is a short page of acknowledgements, which I will read. And I want to also acknowledge Sister Matilda Sommerfeld, who made my magical robe for me. Quite frankly, it's the best robe in the world. It's wool and it's lined and it's just, and I couldn't afford to buy this robe. Thank you, Matilda. Acknowledgements. I first wish to thank Hymenaeus Beta, who just wrote that, Frater Superior of Ordo Templi Orientis, for allowing me access to the Order's archival material and for his fraternal encouragement, counsel, and criticism. My thanks also go to Soror Merrill. That's Phyllis Seckler. She was obviously still alive at the time I wrote this. Soror Merrill of the College of Thelema. Christopher S. Hyatt, now deceased, of the Israel Regardie Foundation. James Wasserman, now deceased. Clive Harper, Frater EAOA, Rick Potter, now deceased, Latin scholar David Coe, DG, Bill Heydrich, and to Paul J. Mosca for his excellent photographs of St. Constance in her robe, and Ed Sentowski for his makeup artistry on that photo shoot. It gives me profound pleasure to thank the dedicated and talented Thelemic ritualists of Heru Raha Lodge OTO and 93 Lodge OTO. 93 Lodge is now Golden Lotus Lodge. And Matilda is going to be talking about Phyllis Eckler at 1 o'clock today on their, I believe you can find it on their Facebook website of Golden Lotus Lodge OTO. I'm just plugging everything this morning. Okay, I would like to thank the Thelemic ritualists of Heru Raha Lodge and 93 Lodge OTO, with whom I've labored and from whom I've learned for more than 15 years, especially Leroy Lauer, Doug James, Karen James, Steve Abbott, Judy Abbott, Jim Kababik, David P. Wilson, now deceased, and Constance DuQuette. Lastly, unto them from whose eyes the veil of life hath fallen, Grady L. McMurtry, Caleb Hymenaeus Alpha 10th degree, Francis Israel Regarde, Gerald York, and the prophet of the lovely star, Aleister Crowley. I offer my perpetual thanks. Then I give reference to the quoted material that serves as epigrams for every chapter, and I don't think we need to do that, but I refer you to Roman numeral page 11 and 12. So I know I've taken a lot of time, but I'm going to read the introduction. If you've got this book, it won't be in there. This is the new introduction. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Liber Alvel Legis, chapter 1, verse 40. The Magick of Aleister Crowley, a handbook of the rituals of Thelema. Wait a minute. That sounds suspiciously like a book that was first published in 1993 called The Magick of Thelema, a handbook of the rituals of Aleister Crowley. You're right. But is it the same book? Well, yes and no. Yes, because all the material, sans a few typographical errors, found in the Magick of Thelema is included in this book. No, because the present work has been enlarged and updated with new material, including this introduction, and a chapter featuring frequently asked questions about Aleister Crowley, and a chapter on Crowley's rites of Eleusis. Perhaps the most important change is the title itself. The Magick of Aleister Crowley, I believe, more accurately conveys the essence of what lies between the covers. And while it is true that you can't judge a book by its cover, it's also true that you won't read a book if you don't understand the cover. I must sadly report that for the last 10 years, the first thing I most often hear when I hand somebody a copy of the Magick of Thelema is something like, "The Magick of Thelema. Who's Thelema?" By the time I explain to him that it's not Thelema, it's Thelema, which is a Greek word for will, and then attempt to explain about such things as the evolution of magical formulae and a philosophy that puts the individual at the center of the universe, their eyes glaze over completely. The name Aleister Crowley, on the other hand, provokes a far more animated response. My God, wasn't he some kind of devil worshiper? Or into the dark side, are we? It seems that everybody who's ever heard the name Aleister Crowley has an instant and often negative opinion of the man. Nevertheless, nearly everyone is intrigued and wants to hear a little more. It's likely that at this very moment you're reading these words not because of your burning desire to know more about Thelema, but because you want to know more about Aleister Crowley and his works. That's not surprising. Crowley is far more famous today than he ever was during his lifetime. While he lived, he was lionized by a tiny group of students and supporters, an odd mix of free-thinking spiritual bohemians and eccentric intelligentsia. His public reputation was molded almost entirely by a vilifying string of tabloid articles filled with half-truths, distortions, and downright lies concerning his philosophy and his activities. At the time of his death in 1947, his serious disciples had dwindled down to near extinction, and with them the life and works of this remarkable man seemed doomed to oblivion. For exactly 20 years, Crowley, for all intents and purposes, lie dead in obscurity. Then a miracle of Dionysian proportions occurred. He was quite literally raised from the dead by the most famous living entity on earth, the Beatles. It was 20 years ago today. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was arguably the most anticipated piece of musical art in human history. And its magnificently colored album jacket was for a time one of the most recognizable works of modern visual art in the world. Designed by pop artist Peter Blake, the cover was an orderly collage of 62 of the Beatles' People We Like. At the top row, sandwiched between Hindu holy man Swami Sri Yukteswar and Mae West, beams the unmistakable visage of Aleister Crowley. Beatles fanatics, and they were and are legion, dissected every word of every cut of that historic album in hopes of uncovering secret political messages or spiritual truths. They also spent countless hours trying to identify every face on the cover and ponder why the Beatles would number that person among the people we like. It was easy to guess why they would include holy men, hipsters and heroes, personal friends and movie stars. Everyone in the collage seemed to be someone most any of us would like. Everyone, that is, except Aleister Crowley. Of all 62 people we like, Aleister Crowley was the only one with a patently evil reputation. Some of us wanted to know more about this man. I'm not suggesting that the Beatles consciously contrived to resurrect worldwide interest in Aleister Crowley. I truly believe that one or more of them, most likely John Lennon, simply knew enough about Crowley to warrant his inclusion. Nonetheless, since 1967, interest in Crowley has mushroomed. Currently, there are no less than 7 biographies in print, 3 published in just the past 3 years. His written works, which until the mid-1970s were few and nearly impossible to find, are now available everywhere and translated into many languages. And I'd like to add, the finest of Crowley's biographies is by my brother, Richard Kaczynski, Perdurabo. So this is not a bona fide biography of Aleister Crowley. Perdurabo by Kaczynski is. Get it, read it, enjoy it. But I digress. Perhaps most astounding is the fact that the Magick of Aleister Crowley, his Thelemic philosophy, his program of scientific illuminism, is embraced by thousands of people from all walks of life throughout the world. Even the English public, whose opinion of him in life was so terribly misguided, is now awakening to the national treasure this native son represents. In 2002, the BBC conducted a poll of 30,000 Britons, asking them to name their greatest Briton. Voted number 73 among the top 100 greatest Britons of all time. Between Henry V and Robert Bruce was the quote, famous poet, author, and philosopher Aleister Crowley. Love is the Law, Love Under Will, Lon Milo DuQuette. I wrote this on the vernal equinox of 2003. Tomorrow, Sunday, don't forget daylight savings time starts tonight. Curse it! We start chapter 0. Frequently asked questions about Aleister Crowley. So, I hope you enjoyed my fashion show. Here, hang on. I'll stand up. I mean, it's a great road. Here, I'll come at you from another direction, just so you can see it. Thank you, Matilda. And thank you guys for being part of my morning, and I hope you enjoy our new adventure that started today, the Magick of Aleister Crowley. I know we went a little over. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow with frequently asked questions about Aleister Crowley. Until then, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Why do I say that? We'll probably find out a little more as we read on. Have a good day and a good weekend.